Thank you, Eugene. And as he mentioned, we're going to be taking a short break from the series. And today I want to talk about hope and fighting strength and weakness. And to do that, we're going to actually be diving into the book of Daniel. Specifically, we're going to be reading the story of the lion's den in Daniel. And I know if you grew up in church, if you were in Sunday school, there's a very good chance you probably, at some point in time, colored in a coloring book of that story. And even if you didn't grow up in church, you most likely heard the lion's den story. It's one of the more popular stories in the Bible, and it's often used as a form to teach about prayer. And that's a big message in this story, but I also think there's a big message of hope in the story and fighting strength in weakness. And so let's dive right in. We're going to start our reading at Daniel 6, verse 7, and we're going to read through 9. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing, that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. So this is laying the foundation of what gets Daniel thrown into the lion's den. King Darius had multiple advisors at that time, and Daniel was his favorite, in part due to his spirit and just who he was as a man. And so the other advisors decided that they wanted to oust Daniel. And this is the conclusion they came to. The thing about Daniel was he was a great public servant. In fact, his record was pretty much spotless as a public servant. It doesn't mean he was a perfect man, but as a public servant, he did a great job. And that on its own speaks to the character of Daniel. Right? If we think today and we look out there and you look at people in Congress or whatever you want, no one has a spotless record. But Daniel was a great public service, and so this is what they came up with. They went to the king and they told the king, hey, they knew Daniel prayed, and they're like, hey, let's kind of maybe test people's loyalty to you. So for 30 days, people can only pray to you. And this was their way of getting Daniel out. So this sets the stage. Next, we're going to read for quite a bit. We're going to read Daniel 6, 10 to 18. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room, where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then these men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the ring of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. So it's very clear here, right off the bat, that the king was tricked. This decree goes into effect, and by the way, the king was most likely under the impression that they all kind of agreed to this decree, all of them being including Daniel, that they all decided to put this law into motion. They put this law into motion, and then they go to they go to the king. They're like, hey, by the way, you know this law you put into motion? It's final, you know that, right? And the king goes, yeah. And they're like, it can't be changed. And the king goes, of course it can't be changed. So no matter what happens, this law is final. It is what it is. No matter what, we have to upload it or uphold it. And the king goes, of course. And then they go, oh, by the way, just to kind of toss it in there, your buddy Daniel broke it, right? So they clearly tricked the king, and we know this because later they're all thrown into the lion's den. But the big point of what I want us to focus on from this passage here is how Daniel reacts to the situation and how the king reacts to the situation, and the difference between them two in the moment. Daniel is the one in the lion's den. He's the one literally staring death in the face. He's in utter darkness, and yet the king is the one at home. For all intents and purposes, the king has the best entertainment available to him. The king most likely has the best food available to him. The king is the one with the most comfortable bed. The king is in a great situation if we look at it from the outside in. Yet the king is the one that's restless. The king is the one that cannot sleep. The king is the one that's anxious. The king is the one without hope. Despite being in a much better situation than Daniel in the moment, despite having everything, despite not being the one in the lion's den, Daniel is the one with hope. Daniel is the one with peace, and the king is the one that's restless. The thing about hope is a foundation in our life. It's one of the most important things we can have. Without hope, there's really nothing, right? For people, I'm sure most of us have been in a situation at some point in our life where we do not have hope, where we feel hopeless. In those moments in time, whether something happened or anxiety or depression or whatever it is, those moments that create a sense of hopelessness. The sun doesn't shine the same, food doesn't taste great, music doesn't sound good, entertainment isn't entertaining. Nothing really matters. When we're hopeless, nothing really matters for us. In Corinthians, when it talks about the gifts, it mentions hope, faith, and love, with love being the greatest of them all. But hope and faith are still one of the most important things in our life. And the king in this position is in a place where he is without hope. He is hopeless. And the difference between the two is Daniel, as we'll read later on, he put his trust in God. Daniel is the one that put his trust in his God. And so despite being in a worse situation, I think it's safe to say that Daniel, in this moment in time, was better off than the king. Despite being in a worse situation on paper, from anybody looking from the outside, everyone would say, oh, the king has it great, Daniel has it terrible. Yet Daniel was in a better situation than the king. Daniel was at peace. Right? It doesn't matter how good things might be around you. When you're without hope, your situation is automatically worse off than somebody without hope. And that's where the king is here in a castle or whatever, without hope. And Daniel was with hope in a lion's den because he put his trust in God. Reading on, Daniel 6, verses 19 to 23. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouth of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted God. So the first thing is, right, the king comes to the den and he says in an anguished voice, he goes, "Oh, hey, Daniel, has your king or has your God rescued you?" Now, I'm sure the king had maybe a hope, right? He hoped in, not that he was filled with hope, but he had some hope that Daniel would be rescued. But deep down, I'm pretty sure the king thought he's going to come to the lion's den and Daniel's going to be dead. Right? He came in an anguished voice, probably expecting not to hear anything back from Daniel. Of course, Daniel answers, and he tells him, and it says, because Daniel had trusted God, he had been saved. A big takeaway from this reading, and something I want us to walk away with, is that for us in our life, right, we are in a lion's den, not literally, I hope not literally speaking, but we're metaphorically in a lion's den with all these issues around us, right? Everything around us, problems trying to drag us down, right? Trying to take hope from us, whether it be our job or maybe losing a job or money or friends, right? Having issues, loss, grief, anxiety, depression. And all these issues do their best to tear us down. All these issues do their best to bring us down. And even going further, research actually shows that we remember our negative experiences in our life a lot more than we remember our positive experiences. And I have a story to illustrate that. I'm sure a lot of you guys know I'm a big sports guy. I love sports. Last couple times I preached, I mentioned sports, and so might as well bring up sports again. Now, when I was a kid, I liked sports a lot more than I do now. I was a lot more into sports when I was in elementary school, middle school, right? You're a kid, and I didn't really have a lot of responsibilities. I didn't have a lot of stuff on my plate other than like school. And so all my energy and all my kind of worry per se went into sports. And it was how me and my friends, that was our thing. That's what we would bond over. We always played basketball, played football. We always watched basketball, watched football. We had our favorite teams. We would argue about it. And that was a big part of my childhood. Now, I remember in 2013 when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. Right? I remember we beat the Broncos, and I remember that day pretty vividly. I remember where I was. We were watching it at a projector at a church. Eugene's laughing because he was there. It was great. I remember where I was. I remember some of the plays that happened. I remember the game started with a safety. I remember Demaryius Thomas almost getting knocked out by Cam Chancellor. I remember us winning the game. After the game, I remember driving home. We were driving down the road, right? And people were honking. And it was great. And it was an amazing day, and it was fun. And then I remember us trying to burn a Denver Broncos jersey. I don't know why. We're like 13. I don't even remember if it worked, but we did. And it was fun. The next year was the year we faced the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And that's the year we lost the Super Bowl. And the thing is, I also remember where we were. We were at Eugene's dad's house that year. And I remember everyone was around the TV. I remember I was standing in the back when the Seahawks were at the 1 yard line. And we were all under the impression that we were going to win again. We were all under the impression that Marshawn Lynch is about to get the ball, he's going to run in, and he's going to score. And then I remember Russell Wilson dropping back and throwing the ball to Malcolm Butler. Then I remember sitting at a chair, on a beanbag chair to be specific, and little me, I was like in 8th grade, I wasn't that little, but I was sitting on the beanbag chair, and I was just staring. And then I remember Albina laughing, because Albina found it funny how much we cared about football, and that we were all broken. The house was dead. And thing is, Albina has a point, but in that moment at time, I was ready to fight Albina, right? I was extremely upset. And then I remember driving home after church, and the roads were empty, after the game, and I had to go to church after the game, right? We went to church after the game, and the interesting thing is, that Super Bowl loss, everything about that experience, the lows of that experience hurt a lot more than the highs of the win. And I'm sure for people that are big sports fans, right, that are big Seahawks fans, can relate. Like, if I see a play for the Super Bowl win, even to this day, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But when I still see a picture of that Malcolm Brown interception where Lockett is in the air, I still don't want to look at it. I don't want to see it. Even afterwards, for the win, there was a couple days and there was a parade, and then you kind of forget about it. When we lost, up until the season started, I didn't really check any sports media. And everything about that loss hurt more than the benefits of that win. Everything in that loss lasted more, resonated more in my life, and lasted longer than all the positives of the Super Bowl we won the year before. And the heartbreak went a lot deeper than the happiness. And our life is full of these experiences. That's just the reality, right? That's life. It throws things at us, and we're lucky to go a day maybe without feeling some negative experience, maybe a fight, right? For people battling anxiety, it could be 10 minutes where we feel all right, right? We have loss in life, health, financial issues, all these problems that do their best to drag us down, that do their best to rob us of hope, that do their best to put us down and make our positive experiences mean nothing. And it doesn't mean life's not good, and it doesn't mean life's not amazing, but the reality of life is it can be harsh. It can be brutal. The reality of life on earth is it can at any moment try to take everything from us. And the Bible doesn't promise money or wealth or anything like that. In fact, if we go to 1 Timothy and read 1 Timothy 6, 3-5, this is Paul talking about false teachers. He says, if anyone teaches otherwise and does not agree to the sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching, they are conceited and understand nothing. They have an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words that result in envy, strife, malicious talk, and suspicious and constant friction between people of corrupt mind, who have been robbed of the truth and who think godliness is a means to financial gain. In this specific verse, of course, Paul is talking about financial gain, but this can be replaced with a lot of things. And Paul here does not mince words. If we look at the language Paul is using, he's being fairly harsh. He's clearly upset by false teachers, right? He uses words such as unhealthy interest, envy, strife, malicious talk, evil suspicion, friction, people of corrupt mind who have been robbed of the truth. So life is going to throw things at us. And life is going to try to make us weak over and over again. And it's really easy to lose hope. It's really easy to become like the king in this story with Daniel, where you may seem like you have everything, but yet there's no hope. But oftentimes, we're not even in the position of the king. More often than not, we're in the position of Daniel in a lion's den with issues staring us in our face. Now, when we read on from Daniel, we read verses 25 to 28. This is how the story concludes. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and people of every language in all of the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus, the Persian. Here's the beauty of the ending of the story of the lion's den. The story ends with the king seeing the power of God. And the story ends with the kingdom seeing the power of God. And why is that? What made the king with such conviction say this and see the power of God? The king realized that what happened to Daniel in that lion's den could not have been Daniel. Right? It logically does not compute. It does not make sense for Daniel to enter a den with hungry lions and for the next morning for the king to show up and for Daniel to be all right. Logically, it didn't make sense. And so the king was able to come to one conclusion, and that wasn't Daniel. That was God working through Daniel. See, in Daniel's moment of weakness, that's when God used him. In Daniel's moment of weakness, through God, the whole kingdom and the king were able to see God's glory. If we go to 2 Corinthians, verses 12, 8 to 10, this is Paul talking about the thorn in his side. He says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why for Christ's sake I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Now this is Paul again talking about the thorn that was in his side. Now, we don't really know what the thorn was. It could have been spiritual, it could have been emotional, it could have been a physical thorn that was placed on him. And this thorn was given to Paul after God revealed something that was meant for Paul. And it was very easy in that moment when Paul received this from God for maybe Paul's ego to grow. But God placed a thorn in his side. And we know this thorn was extremely bothersome to Paul. He cried out 3 times for God. In fact, we can likely infer that it most likely hindered his ministry. It most likely made it tougher for Paul to continue his ministry. And in a sense, he might be desperate here. Again, he's crying out to God. And in this verse, he kind of comes to the conclusion that it might be there to stay, right? It might be there to stay. God told him no, and this is that realization by Paul. And he says, your power is made perfect in my weakness. And then he goes on to say, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul here comes to a conclusion. He comes to the conclusion that when he is weak, that's when he is closest to God. Paul, at his weakest, is the closest he is to God. And at his closest to God, that's when he is the strongest. Paul understands that his weakness is an opportunity for God to show his glory. See, if I do something, if I go out there and I climb a mountain, metaphorically speaking, I climb a mountain and I conquer it, and I feel like I conquered that mountain. It was me. I climbed up that mountain with my power. When I get back, I'm going to tell people I conquered that mountain. And that glory is not for God. I'm taking that glory. I'm taking that glory on myself. I'm not giving it to God. On the other hand, if I'm climbing this mountain and I feel like I can't climb it and I feel dead, and I feel like no matter what I do, I cannot get to the top, and I'm ready to go, and I'm weak, and then somebody carries me to the top of that mountain, I'm not going to go around telling people I climbed that mountain. I'm going to tell people I got carried to the top of the mountain, right? And that's what Paul's inferring here, that glory to God. In his weakness, Paul understands that in this point of time, he cannot do this alone. And that's when God's glory is shown. That's where we see God's glory. And I know it's kind of easy to say, right? In a sense, it's very easy to say, just trust God, and we have all these issues, and have hope, and be strong when you are weak. And it's easy to use words, but in reality, in life, oftentimes it's hard. In fact, most of the time it's probably hard when we're surrounded by issues, when things might be crumbling around us, when everything in our life is trying to snatch hope from us, when we're in lion's den. In those moments in time, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely tough. But as we're kind of approaching our close here, there is a beautiful verse in Romans 5, verse 3 to 5. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. And it says, "Not only so, but we also glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." This is once again Paul. There's a lot of Paul today. And Paul starts off by saying, not only so, but we. And when Paul is talking about we here, he's specifically referring to Christians. He's referring to not everyone, but he's talking about Christians. And he says, we glory in our suffering. In other words, our suffering, our problems, they're not just problems. It's not just suffering for the sake of suffering. There's more to it. And Paul goes on to say, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. In James 1, 2 to 3, it says, testing of faith produces steadfastness. So we see that message repeated again there. And another way to look at hope is confidence that God will deliver on his promises. We're confident that in our trust through God, he will deliver on his promises. And an analogy I have for it, an analogy that I kind of thought of, is that imagine you're learning to swim. You don't know how to swim at all. You're learning to swim, and you get thrown in a lake or in a pool or whatever. You're thrown in this pool, you start flailing around, and you feel like you're going to die. You start intaking water, your arms flopping around, you go under, and your instructor pulls you out. He pulls you out, you catch your breath, and he throws you back in. Once again, you're learning to swim. You're trying to swim. You intake water. You start to drown, you get pulled out, you catch your breath, you get thrown in again. This time when you start to drown, maybe you won't intake as much water, maybe you won't flop around, because now you're under the impression that your instructor is going to pull you out. You're confident he's going to pull me out. Next time you get thrown in, you might swim a little bit better. Now you have experience. Once again, you might start to drown, and now you know you're going to get pulled out. Let's say, just for analogy's sake, now you're swimming in a lake or in an ocean. You're swimming around an island, and he's behind you on a boat. Now you get hit with a storm, and a storm's a new experience for you. You've never been in a storm before. You've never swam in a storm before. You're swimming in this storm. You start to go under, and you panic again. It's a new circumstance. You get pulled out again, and you get thrown in again. Now you're confident in a storm. If you swim through a hurricane, you're going to be an amazing swimmer. If you get rescued by your instructor in a hurricane, you're going to put your faith in that instructor. And no matter the circumstances, now you're going to trust him that no matter what, you're going to be pulled out of that water. And you become a better swimmer that way. Paul is saying here that all of these weaknesses we have, they do two things. The first is they bring us closer to God. Right? The first thing is they draw us closer to God. They show his power. But the other thing is they make us stronger. They build us up. They callous us. They make us a better person. They make us a better Christian. All our experiences build us up. Right? They build our character. And through that building of character, it instills hope in our lives. And hope is essential. And then we become like Daniel in that lion's den, where he was at peace with death staring him in the face, where he was at peace with his life literally almost torn to pieces from every direction. See, the realization of when we realize we can put our trust in God, when we realize that God is a source of our hope, where God is a source of our strength, when we realize that, everything changes. Paul here in Romans 5, 3-5, he's saying that Christians are given a baseline of hope. That no matter what, we have hope. No matter the circumstances, when we put our trust in God, we have hope. If you lose your job, I'm good, I have hope. No matter the issue, I'm good, I have hope. Illness, I'm good, I have hope. Lost, I'm good. Death staring you in the face, I'm good. I'm afforded a hope through my trust in God that God will deliver on his promises no matter what. When we put our trust in God, when we put our faith in God, knowing that God has us, that's God with us, that God is with us, and that no matter what, our ultimate gift awaits in his kingdom, that's when we know we're good. That's when our faith grows. That's when our love grows. That's when we grow as a people through our trust in God. That's when we are strong in our weaknesses, just like Paul was with that thorn in his side. That's when we are strong, just like Daniel was in that lion's den. That's when we are strong, and much like Daniel impacted an entire kingdom, just like Daniel impacted the king, we are able to impact those around us through our hope. The reality is, people don't look at us and what we have. That's not how we impact people. We impact people by who we are. We impact people by how we overcome. Because when people see we're in a situation that should not be overcomable, that's when God shines through. That's when we see God, and that's when other people see God. And that's how we grow stronger, and that's how our community grows stronger, through hope, through finding strength in weakness that is not our own. That's the beauty of putting our trust in God. That's the beauty of putting our trust in God in moments of weakness. And as crazy as it may sound, that's how weakness is a gift. That as we go on, we spend time in this lion's den of ours, surrounded by issues. It's an opportunity to change our community. It's an opportunity for us to grow. And it's a gift for us to grow closer with God. That realization that we can trust God changes everything. It doesn't make hope a feeling anymore. Everything around us on earth is fleeting, right? Money comes and goes. Money, temporary happiness. You get $1,000, you want 10. You get 10, you want 100. You get 100, you want 1,000,000, and that 1,000,000 feels the same as that 1,000 felt when you got it. You always want more. Whatever you buy with that money doesn't last long, right? It doesn't last long. No matter what purchase you make, it's going to make you happy for a couple weeks maybe, right? A couple months on a big purchase, and then you want a bigger purchase. Even people, they come and go, and we deal with loss, and we deal with illness, and again, that's just the reality of life here on earth. But in the end, our promise is not on earth, it's in heaven. In the end, our struggles on earth are to build us up. And that's what gives us hope as Christians. That's what gives us faith in God, that knowing our promises in heaven, and that no matter what happens on earth, in the end, God is going to carry us out. Just like it says in the Bible, if God feeds the birds, why would we not be fed? Why would we not be able to prosper? And I know it's tough again in moments. In moments, it's tough for us to put faith in God, and it's tough to trust God when you feel like you're at the bottom of a pit. But the reality is, for those of us already with hope, we're called to hold on to that hope. For those of us that already have hope as Christians, have a baseline of hope, we're called to hold on to that hope. No matter the circumstance, no matter what life throws at us, no matter how bad our lives then gets, we're called to hold on to that hope. Because by holding on to that hope, we get the benefits we see in Romans 5:3-5. We grow as a person. And next time we face issues, we grow even more. And our community grows, and people around us grow through hope. Because from people looking on the outside, we should not have that hope, but yet we do. And for people that do not have that hope, I simply ask you take a jump and you put your trust in God. For the peace and joy you get from that trust in God, I promise you nothing on earth can give you. That's only something that is afforded through putting your trust in God, through putting your faith in God. There's nothing on earth that can give us a baseline of hope except our trust in God. Nothing. There is nothing that can give us true strength in weakness other than putting our trust in God. Amen?